Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 3 o'clock, and it's time to call our meeting together for the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency, scheduled for 3 o'clock on April 20th. We have a roll call, please. Everybody looks present. Are you good with that? I'm good. Okay. Any changes to agenda? Okay. Assume the agenda is approved. Open public comment is an opportunity for people to speak on items not on the agenda. Would like to come forward. Anybody here for public comment? Seeing none. I'd like to close the public comment. And we have our first agency business is that of a closed session. So those who are going to hold closed session in this room, is that correct? So would we like to ask all of you who are not a part of closed session to stand out in the hall and we'll go from there.
Diane, you could stay if you wanted to.
Oh, can they stay if they want to?
Yeah.
For closed session?
Yeah. Yes, I talked with the chairman before the meeting, and Camille, you and Don can stay in the closed session in your advisory roles. You just don't get to vote. Yeah. And Lynanne, you likewise can stay as secretary.
What about the guests in the back?
Okay. And Diane's with City of Davis. She can stay. You are, sir? My UC Davis. Okay. Great. And you're okay with him sitting in, Camille? Okay.
Okay. Then all present and
yes, and then we've got engineering staff, and staff.
Everybody in the room is accounted for.
Everyone in the room is accounted for.
All
yes,
right,
sir.
let's go forward.
Let's go forward. So I will start it off.
Okay, yes.
Okay, let's come back into public session. The agency board met in closed session, and there's no reportable action at this time. We move on to agency business. We have the consent items, approval of the February 2nd meeting, of the special minutes of the meeting, and the project financing update. Do we have any questions? We have a motion to approve the consent?
I'll move consent.
Been moved by consent. Do I have a second? Been moved and second to approve consent items A and B. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Item number 3, Davis Woodland Water Supply Project Update, Information Discussion. Mr. Deemer.
So Chairman Davies and board members, I have a very brief update for you this afternoon. Just talk very briefly about our funding picture, the joint intake construction update, current operations, and then an update on the project cost. So this is information that is in your project financing update, but just to highlight, we have received commitments and agreements for $40.2 million in grant funding for the joint intake, $20.1 million each from the feds and state. We've received approximately 19.9 on the federal side. There's remaining $200,000 appropriated as some of the approved change orders are submitted. And we have the Prop 1 $8.1 million grant, the last increment of state grant funding, has been executed, and we found out yesterday that 4.1 of that has been received, and an additional 3.1 has been approved, and the check's in the mail. So we're in the process of receiving that full 8.1 million. Just a quick update on the SRF loans. Woodland has a loan of $111.4 million. We've submitted $104 million to date, and we received a little over $101 million. And Davis's loan is for $95.5 million. The full $95.5 million has been submitted, and $85.4 has been received. On the joint intake project, very quickly, the project was substantially complete on October 29th. By virtue of a proposed settlement with Balfour Beatty, they're scheduled to be off-site by May 1st. The remaining work is to remove existing conduit and grout conduit through the levee, and the window for this is, we're trying to identify, is fall of this year, October, September timeframe. And then CH, pending board action today, we're seeking to have CH2M Hill resolve log boom anchorage issues and construct the redundant seal water system for the agency's pumps, and that will come up later in the agenda. This is a slide that shows the aerial view of the work area. The conduit again, or the culvert to be removed and grouted, is right here. This photo is somewhat dated. The existing intake in this above-ground section of conduit is removed. So if you were to go out to the site today, that would no longer be there. It was just the work associated with the culvert that couldn't be completed because of the water levels. So in terms of operation, the treatment plant's currently producing about 10.5 million gallons a day. It's satisfying essentially all of the demands in both Woodland and Davis. We talked in the past about the permit to operate from the Division of Drinking Water. That was a key permit that we've been working on literally for years. We did receive that this past week. The plant is meeting all regulatory and contract requirements. All of the various water quality and diversion quantities are being posted to the agency website. We received some inquiries from a number of citizens about the water quality. So we've, with the help of West Joseph CH2M Hill, we've developed a one-page summary of the water quality and what the key constituents are in the water being delivered and how that compares to the contract requirements. So that's available on the agency website for anyone who's interested in the water quality being produced by the new plant. And we are continuing to work with CH2M Hill to optimize the process operations. Manganese was an issue or a constituent that was raising some concern, and actually they've made some changes to the treatment process, and for the past month or so, for about the past month, the manganese levels leaving the plant have been zero. Just a brief touch on discolored water. As we've reported before, there have been some events at various locations on and off in Woodland since last summer. Davis has not, according to the operations staff, not received any abnormal number of water quality complaints since the surface water plant went into operation. The experts believe it's related to lower system alkalinity combined with higher chlorine residual. So the short answer is we're looking at a change in the additives, the polymer that's the corrosion inhibitor that's added at the finished water pump station to alleviate that. But in the meantime, all of the water treatment regulations are being met. The issue with the discolored water is aesthetic. The cities continue to look at additional sampling and flushing and swabbing of the pipes. And we're working with the Division of Drinking Water to change, as I said, the corrosion inhibitor that's added to the finished water, going to a polyphosphate addition that our experts tell us should sequester the discolored water and help alleviate the occasional complaints that we're receiving. Paul touched on this. This is the same table that you've seen for the past several meetings, but with the proposed settlement with Balfour Beatty, I think we're quite confident that the total regional cost of $204.5 million will not go up. we will be able to live within that projected capital cost budget, and we'll be coming back to the board in June with our proposed budget for next year, and we'll have a more quantified information for you on the total project cost at that time. And with that, be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
From a public standpoint, I wanted you to review a little bit about the road because,
Yes, I'm sorry.
would you please do that?
So let me go back to the aerial photo. So the County Road 117 has been impacted by the construction activity of the new intake and the removal of the existing intake. And we have had some inquiries recently about the condition of the road. So we've been working closely with Reclamation District 2035 to make sure that the contractor before Balfour Beatty, before they leave the site on May 1st, that the road potholes and repairs are complete and the road is passable and drivable and safe. Following their exit from the project May 1st, we're working with RD 2035 to make sure that those temporary repairs are continued and that we don't have any potholes or other issues associated with 117. Once we complete the, are able to complete the removal of this conduit under the road, hopefully in the fall, water levels permitting, we will be in a position to do final paving on the entire stretch of 117 that was impacted, and that the contractor requires be repaved. The contract requires be repaved, and we'll also be looking at whether there are any possible ways that we could accelerate or do some of the permanent paving sooner, and we're looking at that right now.
Thank you. Any questions regarding the update? Mr. Saylor?
This question that you just answered, some community members have indicated that their belief is that the contract only for the road repair and pavement only covers a certain length of, they say 400 feet. But what you're saying is that it's to replace the pavement.
No, I think that the contract does specify a defined stretch of road that needs to be repaired. So we'll need to take a closer look at that. We'll meet with the county staff and review the permit conditions with them to better understand the extent of the paving that's required.
Okay, because it looks like a greater segment, longer segment than the 400 feet that I just mentioned. Looks like more of it has been damaged than that.
Okay, well,
And that's part of what you'll talk about.
Yeah, we'll have to do that assessment and
Okay.
consult with the county staff and compare that to
Well, I
the
appreciate
contract
your
requirements.
responsiveness
Yeah.
to this.
So I don't have a specific answer for you,
Okay.
Supervisor Saylor, but understand the question and we will look into it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
You can report back at our next meeting on that as well,
Yes.
probably. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. You might want to leave that item up for the boom discussion. That might be helpful, yeah, for the next item. So we move on to item number 4 then on the agenda.
I can provide you a brief overview. This is a contract amendment to the operations contract with C.H. Twomhill that's being recommended. There's actually 3 parts to it. The first, I think we might have talked about it at a previous board meeting, but the agency's pumps, this is the seal water portion of the proposed contract amendment. The agency's pumps are supplied by well water, and the seals on the pump need a continuous source of fresh water to keep the seals flushed and the shaft protected. We had an outage several months ago where we lost that seal water. And in reviewing the loss of the seal water and the impact on the pumps, the agency pumps, which was to shut them down, we determined that it was prudent to have a backup seal water system so that if we lost one, the redundant system would take over and we wouldn't lose power to our pumps and the ability to deliver raw water from the river to the treatment plant. So that's the first part. The second part is to repair the log boom. And so as you see on this diagram here, this is the log boom. If you saw a current photo of the new intake, you would see that this log boom is disconnected about right here, and this piece is floating out here, and then this piece is floating separate. So the second part of this contract amendment is to rejoin the log boom where it's separated. We did look at the design. I didn't see that the design was flawed. In other words, that the original design was adequate, but the repair that is being proposed will actually be done from the river in a boat, and we'll have a different mechanism to reconnect the two log boom sections. I think it'll be as strong or stronger. It'll also allow the work to be done from the river, and it'll allow for a fairly cost-effective repair of that. And then the final piece of the proposed contract amendment is for modifications to the SCADA system to provide data to the cities that they feel are necessary to monitor the operations of the regional system.
Any questions or on the information provided? Yes, sir. Well,
With regard to the log boom, I see that's like in 4 sections, and that's what it looks like at least. And I'm assuming there's the same connector between all 4 sections. Are we gonna? And it was only one of those section joints that came loose or detached, I suppose. Is there the intent to put the new connectors between all the different sections?
No, at this point, I think, and Lindsay, you can correct me if I'm wrong or you have additional information, but I think that the review of the existing connections, it was determined that the design was adequate. So at this point, we're just proposing to repair the one connection that's failed. I think the feeling of the folks that we've had look at this is that we had an extraordinary winter in terms of flows and debris, and what happened was hopefully a one-time event, and that we wouldn't expect this to recur on a continuing basis.
And this is to protect the facility. The screens would be what the debris would hit were it not for this log boom, right? That's the whole idea behind this. Is this is to
Exactly,
get
yes.
the biggest stuff,
Yes.
you know, a certain distance away from the facility. There's no, I mean, it's disconnected right now. There's no worry that we're in some added danger of debris right now, or have there been temporary measures that have been taken?
No, I think we feel that that risk is fairly minimal at this point with the heavy loading of debris occurring during the heavy storms, and as we come into the spring season, we don't see a significant risk there. But we do plan, assuming the board approves the amendment, to get in as soon as the river allows us to make that reconnection.
Sure. And of course, that also goes to say we haven't experienced any damage or anything to our screens because of debris.
That's correct.
Okay.
It
other
did its
comments or
job.
questions?
Thanks.
Don?
I did have an opportunity, as I drove to see the road, the construction management foreman was on site, and he did allow me to walk around, and I think it's just a beautiful facility, and it is operable, and I would really encourage us to take a group trip to the site at some point soon and see the work that we've paid for. It's marvelous.
Just to follow up on Will's comment, what would be the cost to replace all 4 of those connectors as opposed to just repairing one? Was that considered?
It was considered. The consideration was whether the connector as designed for all of the other connection points was adequate or whether they needed to be replaced. I don't know if we did an estimate to replace them all. Lindsay, do you know?
I think, well,
Why don't you come up and...
It's on already. So the one, I think the cost to repair the one is $4,500, but a lot of that is just to rent the boat to get out there. And so we didn't do an estimate to break it down if we did all 4 of them or something like that, 5 connections. But I would guess it's maybe another $500 to $600 per connection. I mean, what I would propose is we can have, when they rent the boat, we can have them go and check out the anchorage at each of the different connection points to determine if they think that they're adequate. And then if not, they can go out there and make adjustments to all the rest of the points.
I think that's what we're asking. Make sure that it's secure, doesn't happen again. I know there's massive steel grates in front where the water comes in, and this is to protect against the larger floating debris.
Yeah.
So I understand that. So I think that was Will's, and I think that's a valid concern, and we'll leave that up to Dennis and you.
I think that's a very good suggestion, so we'll make sure that when we are doing this repair, that all of the other connections are inspected and repaired if necessary.
Seeing no further comments or questions, we have a requested motion on the ball for a contract amendment number 4.
So I'll move the item with that understanding that we just discussed.
Okay, do I have a second? Been moved and seconded to approve contract amendment number 4. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. Budget overview.
Yes, I have just another very brief presentation for you. So give me just a second to pull that up. And this, we wanted to give the board a kind of a high-level overview of what the coming year budget is going to look like. We've had some inquiries from city staff and from various staff members in terms of, what they should be including in their city budgets. So we did this high-level exercise just to see where we are in terms of what we projected last year and how it might have changed this year. So on the capital project cost, as I reviewed briefly a minute ago, the remaining capital work is at the joint intake. It was budgeted this fiscal year, assumed that it was last year that it would be done this year, but because of the reasons we talked about earlier, it's being deferred till FY17, but the overall total project cost number that we reviewed, we believe is sufficient. Operations and maintenance, no major deviations are expected from the June 2016 projections that we presented to the board. As pointed out in the memo, a significant decision that has to be made that does affect the amount of funding needed in each city is how much water is ordered. So the contract has a provision that we need to tell CH2M Hill early on in the process what we expect to be delivered next year, and then that fixes a significant portion of the cost. And then, of course, there's SRF debt and reserve payments. We've looked at those, and what we told you in FY17 will apply in FY18. This is a very, what we're required as part of the agency's procedures to do a 10-year projection. We did one last year. This is it. I won't go through all the numbers. It's very difficult to see, but I just want to make the point that we do a 10-year projection every year as part of the annual budget, and we will be doing one in June. But this is the key information from that larger table that I think is important for the cities, and what we wanted to report to the board is that last year we projected that the operations and maintenance budget would be $8.16 million. Then when you add in the SRF debt and reserve payment, it would add another $10.56 million for a total annual cost next year of $18.7 million. And then that's further broken down by Woodland, Davis, and UC Davis allocations. And so what we're recommending to the cities and the staff is that, at least at this time, those are the numbers to use in any budget projections. And when we come back in June, we'll update these and fine-tune these. But at this point in time, we don't see any major deviations from these numbers.
You don't need anything from us on that, right?
No,
Okay.
just information, and we are sharing this with the staff so that as the city budget gets prepared, we're communicating and consistent in the information.
Go on to item number 6, your long-range board calendar.
And that's just for board information. Our next meeting would be in Woodland on June 16th, and the main item to be discussed there, of course, would be the budget, review and approval of the budget, and then any additional information and detail on the completion of the joint intake work that we discussed earlier.
It's June 15th.
June
Right.
15,
June 15th.
1/6,
1/5.
1/5. Okay. Correspondence.
None to report, although we did pick up a couple of additional awards for the regional water treatment plant recently, and we're in the running we're a finalist for the Clare Hill Award at the Aqua Conference in May. So I think the staff's very proud of the recognition that the project's been getting.
What was that? What was that award called?
It's called the Clare Hill Award.
The person's name, Claire
Yes,
Hill?
Clare Hill is actually one of the founding members of CH2M Hill, and the award is fairly prestigious in the aqua community.
That's another change order.
I missed that. I'll have to catch it earlier or later. No, but within the Aqua Association, it is a fairly prestigious award, so I think we'd be honored we're honored that we made it to the finalists, and it would be even more of a recognition if we were to win the award outright.
Anything from the Technical Advisory Committee?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, City of Woodland is still working with our discolored water. We have Confluence in town this week working with us on jar testing for the new polyphosphate, and we are doing some direct line pigging of our line. Also, we are a finalist for the APWA National Project of the Year Award. That is a extremely prestigious award that we're hopeful that we will be winning, and that'll be in end of August at the same international conference. We've been invited to speak on our ASR work that we've done as an alternate water storage process for small to mid-sized communities. So we'll be speaking at that at that program for that. That's all.
And I just wanted to mention that the technical committee have been discussing with the general manager succession planning, as the general manager noted at our last meeting that he's planning on stepping down in the near future. We've discussed with the general manager a few different options of potentially replacing him as we move into the operations mode, and staff at both cities engaging with Dennis are evaluating those options, and we intend to come back to the board in June with some recommendations of how to replace Dennis. Replace isn't quite the right word. Dennis will be irreplaceable, but have someone serve in the general manager position moving forward.
That's not something we get to vote on, right? whether he leaves or not.
No, he gets to choose when he leaves. We just get to vote on how to replace him.
We just hold the last check, right? Yeah, we hold it.
Paul?
But, yeah, two quick items, though not strictly part of the technical committee. The Woodland City Council last month adopted our next water rate ordinance to cover the next 5-year term. As part of that discussion, the council gave staff direction. We are currently in what I might call still preliminary discussions with staff at the State Water Resources Control Board, among other things, to see if we can restructure or refinance the City of Woodland's $111 million SRF loan, which on an earlier slide you saw very good interest rate. It's a 20-year loan. We're looking at whether we have the option of potentially going to a 30-year repayment, which will provide some short-term rate relief in exchange for spreading the costs. And through those conversations, it's been, we've been reminded that that loan is technically through the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency, because it's the joint loan. So any progress we make on that in the city of Woodland, we would be requiring ultimately probably action by this board in concert with with Woodland City Council. Too early to tell also where it would fall on your calendar, but we would hope that the board would be receptive to convening for that discussion. If there's a recommendation to do so, we would appreciate the board's consideration of that. And then along the awards, full disclosure, last week, 2 weeks ago, we also submitted the project for consideration under the League of California Cities Helen Putnam Award as a public works project, but also touting the collaboration between the two cities, the county, and the other jurisdictions. Not sure when they make those announcements, but as you know, those winners are recognized at the annual conference in September, which will be here in Sacramento. So if we're successful, that'll be a great opportunity to again showcase the project.
Thank you. Any questions of the advisory committee by any of the board members? Okay, let's move on to board member reports or comments. Will? Mr. Saylor? Mr. Barajas?
I've got something kind of related to what
Mr. Lee?
Paul was saying. I was at the League of California Cities meeting last year, and there was a seminar sort of on sort of the challenges that communities face in California regarding water. And it was interesting sitting in on that, because really our two communities have done a lot of the heavy lifting already, and we are in much better positions than many of our, many of the other cities in California. And so that was kind of a nice experience to feel, right? Instead of being behind the curve, we were a little bit ahead of the curve. Related to that, I was wondering if anybody knew when Bill Marble was coming back, because while we did have kind of the grand opening event, and we sort of mentioned him, he wasn't able to be there in person. Do we know when he will be coming back to the area?
We get weekly. We have 21 emails so far from every 2 weeks from his wife, and they have yet to mention that. They mentioned the floods and the snow and all the issues, but we can communicate with Bill, and we can bring that back as information. I believe that it was a 2-year commitment at minimum, so I don't think that they would be back any time before that. I don't believe it is going to be extended at this point. I don't think that's part of the plan. So,
Okay,
I don't have the answer.
I was just thinking it might be nice to keep that in the back of our minds, especially as the board sort of composition changes. But when he comes back to the area, it would be nice to remember all the hard work that he performed. Yes, Paul.
No, just to tag on that, I think it might be a 3-year commitment, but we'll see. As you know, former council member Marble and board member was also a longstanding member of the league board, and part of that Helen Putnam application was a promise we made to him. So we're hoping one way or another, if we're successful there, that he can be also recognized as part of that.
And then the other thing was, I know that we had the event at the facility a little bit prior to its sort of the official opening. Well, it depends on how you describe official opening. I was wondering if we might, in the future, if we might want to have one of these meetings actually on site. And while the grand opening event was enjoyable, I think sort of the smaller group of people, it might allow us just to have a more casual tour and just kind of walk around and ask the silly questions that we might ask, rather than sort of all the people that were there for the grand opening.
Yes, certainly, we have adequate facilities at the treatment plant to hold a meeting there. We could also, as Director Saylor mentioned, couple that with the visit to the joint intake, which isn't too far away. So if that's something that the board would be interested in, we can look into scheduling a future board meeting there.
Yeah. Why don't we work on that? Maybe at our next board meeting. It should be interesting if you're at that point in time, but if not, we can do it later. We want you to be there. We don't want you gone. You have to be there. You guys.
If it's the board would like, we can look into doing it for the June meeting.
In the June meeting, would that be satisfactory? That'd be satisfactory. Camille, you have some comments, right?
No, except to ask Mike, do you have any reports on our participation, our taking of the surface water? Would you like to come up and say anything?
The state permit, so I think that there's is get ready to pump station, the boost pump station.
Thank you. Just a comment. I'd like to call on Greg just for a minute. Woodland has experienced a different kind of chemical imbalance of our waters, and so maybe you could share how much we're dependent on this as opposed to the number of wells we've had to close, and now that we're totally, almost completely involved with surface water. So see how the timing has really affected us and what the causes of that are.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I'm saying the causes, you know, how Woodland's fluoride issues and chromium issues and how we've had to close numerous wells and where we are in that stage and why this is so important to us. Maybe you could just share a minute.
Sure. We have 18 wells, and of those 18 wells, 16 would not pass the Chrome 6 requirements. The other 2 are sporadically pass the Chrome 6 requirements. So what we have done is we are looking at 3 of the wells as supplementary wells that we would pump directly into the trunk line of the surface water so that whatever Chrome 6 there was in there would be mixed in the trunk line. The Chrome 6 isn't measured until it's actually distributed into the consumption lines of the city. So we can use those 3 wells. We have the 2 wells that are marginally that we could use for backup wells. And this is basically going to be our system. We have a couple of more wells that we're going to leave in standby service in the event of a very serious event where we have to have water. We'd be able to use that on an emergency basis.
So those were my comments. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other business to come before the board? Can I have a motion to adjourn then, please?
It's moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn the meeting of the Woodland Davis Clean Water Agency for April 20th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion adjourned. Thank you.